with a whole lot of truth. Remedy Revolution is here for you. Ooh. And now here's your host, Erin Paige.
All interviews presented on the Remedy Revolution podcast are designed to provide information and inspiration only. Guests of the podcast may present opinions and anecdotes which are solely their own. And as always, before beginning any treatment protocol, please consult with your preferred medical provider. Hey everyone, welcome to the Remedy Revolution. My name is Erin, and today we are going to be talking about homeopathy. So I have realized that over the years, despite chatting about homeopathy with guests, as well as giving multiple lectures and recording some of those lectures here on the podcast, there is a number of principles that I haven't actually really demonstrated for each of you. Those of you that are brand new to homeopathy, who don't quite understand perhaps how homeopathy works, or even those of you who have been utilizing homeopathy, but still don't quite understand the basic fundamentals. This podcast is for you. I just wanted to make sure that I thoroughly explained what homeopathy is, because when you have that baseline of education, it makes deciphering remedies so much easier. So, the top 4 principles of homeopathy. Number 1 is the law of similars. So, in homeopathy, we use the term like cures like. And what does that mean? So, essentially, what Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy, hypothesized was that if there was something in nature, say a plant, an animal, or even a mineral that could cause some kind of symptom expression in the patient, that we could utilize a very, very tiny dose of that particular thing within nature to elicit an immune response and to use the body's innate natural intelligence to heal from within. And so when we ask numerous questions about the quality of the symptoms, for example, let's say it's a cough, is it a croupy cough? Is it a dry cough? Is there a lot of phlegm? What color is the phlegm? Are you coughing more at night? Are you coughing more in the morning? Are you coughing, let's say, when you're outdoors more than indoors? So lots of various questions that can get us really to the heart of what the appropriate remedy might be. Because as you'll see in the second principle here, so often people will come up to me and ask me, what remedy shall I take for this symptom? And it's not always quite so cut and dry. So the second principle number 2, is that we are using one remedy for multiple complaints. So I often say that an intake is very in-depth. So I am not only looking at a diagnosis. In fact, most of the times, a diagnosis really doesn't tell me a whole lot of information. A diagnosis might give me a clue as to what kinds of things to ask about. However, a diagnosis isn't necessarily the basis for homeopathic prescribing. So when I ask questions like, what is your personality like? What kinds of diseases have your ancestors suffered? Were they part, for example, of a tuberculosis outbreak? Have you ever experienced psychiatric symptoms? Do you find yourself to be more depressed or more upbeat and positive? Then we ask, obviously, the very physical questions. But we make correlations between all of these symptoms and what the prescribing remedy might do to affect as many symptoms as possible. And oftentimes what happens is when we address the system as a whole, we're looking again for the root cause. And once you get to that root cause, you'll find that these other various symptoms, even if they weren't necessarily in what's called the materia medica, which is essentially the encyclopedia of homeopathic remedies, you can still resolve many of those symptoms. So just because something might not be exactly right when it comes to the laundry list of symptoms doesn't necessarily mean that it's the wrong remedy. In fact, it could very well be the correct remedy, but we're looking at some other specific symptoms that then are at the root of what is causing some of the additional symptoms that you might be experiencing. So that kind of gets to principle number 3, which I often tell my patients, again, the vast majority of questions I receive are about, do you help X condition, or what remedy do I give to stop X symptom? And this can be a really difficult question to answer. So it's not necessarily that homeopaths are trying to be cagey or protect, their livelihood or anything like that. The simple fact of the matter is that homeopathy is one of the most individualized systems of medicine. So, as I mentioned, some of these questions that we ask get very deep into the heart of who you are as an individual. And so, what might be very helpful for one person's arthritis, let's say, might actually not help the other person whatsoever. That might have to do with the root cause. Perhaps there's an infection that's been, chronic infection that's been hampering this person's expression of life. Perhaps there's something deeper. Perhaps there's an emotion tied to some of the symptoms, right? So as a homeopath, it's my job to really work as a detective to understand how it is that you are expressing those symptoms, and additionally, how they are hindering you in life. So, one of the first questions I always ask many of my patients is, what is your core foundational symptom that you feel is hindering you from doing whatever it is that you enjoy? We go deep into what it is that that particular symptom is stopping them from doing. And that's usually the first place I like to go is, all right, well, let's see how much progress we can get towards your goal. Let's say it's gardening, right? Let's say, you've got crippling arthritis, you can't garden anymore because it's just too painful, particularly in the heat, right? Well, what is very challenging for you could be challenging for you in some ways, and challenging for somebody else in many different ways. And so, again, we're getting to the heart of what is it that is really hindering you, and how do we get you back to a state of balance, into a much better place, so that you can then enjoy the things that fuel you, that help you to be who you are. So the other thing is, oftentimes people come to me looking for quick fixes. And this tends to be as about, 80%. I would say almost 100% of my clients come to me for chronic conditions, very difficult and challenging, complex conditions that have infections, that have toxicities, that have deficiencies, that have a multitude of symptoms. Most people don't seek out homeopathy as a first line of defense. And I've talked about this in previous episodes of the podcast. And it's unfortunate, but it's unfortunately true. So many of us really seek out homeopathy as a last resort. And as a result, the majority of my patients tend to be people who have tried everything. And so once they come to me, they're looking for some very, very specific resolution of symptoms. And often they're looking for that resolution right away, because they've been through every other form of treatment and they're frustrated with the lack of progress. And what I always say is that, unfortunately, we have to unravel everything. So there are certain patients that, for example, we might need to begin with a detox protocol. Perhaps it's something like a steroid they've been taking for a long period of time. Well, steroids can actually be quite suppressive. And so with the suppression of steroids, the immune system then has now learned to to function in a suppressed manner. And so it really doesn't have the opportunity to get turned back on, if you will, in order to facilitate a more lasting sense of healing. And so they keep hitting this wall over and over and over again, because as soon as they start a new treatment, the immune system has learned to suppress itself because it's been completely overrun with these steroids. And so oftentimes something like that might not elicit a huge change in the symptom picture immediately, but we have to utilize that detox remedy in order to facilitate healing. So that fourth principle is actually that we're looking for long-term results. I'm not looking to give you a quick fix, something that's going to heal you tomorrow. I'm looking at giving you lasting and long-term results and to give you a better state of health overall. And sometimes that means we have to start at the very beginning, and it can be quite challenging. So I'm going to go into a couple more things. All right. So the minimum dose. So when we talk about homeopathic dosing, there are vast majority of the remedies actually do not have anything of the source material left within that particular remedy. It is the energetic signature of that source material. Now, here's where a lot of people kind of poo-poo homeopathy as being pseudoscientific or what have you. However, when it comes to things like, for example, if you've ever heard of Masaru Emoto, Dr. Masaru Emoto has done a number of scientific experiments on water. And what he has done is similar, if you've ever seen to the plant project that they've done in many elementary schools. So they take two plants and they have children go by the plants and tell them. One plant gets told, that it's beautiful and that it's looking lovely today. And, it gets all the compliments. I would love to be that plant, right? And the second plant is actually given insults. So the kids are encouraged to slew insults at that plant. And the crazy thing is that the plant who is given compliments actually grows into a much healthier plant than the plant that is given insults. The theory behind that is that the work that Dr. Masaru Emoto has done is that the positive words actually restructure the water. And so as they're giving the plants water, that water is restructured and in a positive light, right? That particular plant grows to thrive, whereas the other plant with the unstructured water is not able to sustain itself nearly as well as the plant with the healthy, positively complemented water. And I find this so interesting because Masaru Emoto has also done research on water where they've frozen water molecules from various sources and done experimentation with, let's say, different types of music, for example. And what they found, which was so incredibly interesting, was that water has a memory. And so when the water is in balance, it creates these beautiful snowflake-like patterns. And they're very ordered and uniform. And when the water is unstructured or given input that is negative, whether that be chemicals or it's an industrialized product or it's given, some kind of hateful music that, is upsetting, then that water will actually not be structured. So there's plenty of research showing that everything is energy. We know that we, for example, are made up of the majority, bodies are made up of water. And so why wouldn't this be true of us? And how do we input some of that amazing energetic uniformity and order into our bodies? Because some of the input that we take in is not going to be positive. And oftentimes, that could be, any kind of environmental toxicity, even a deficiency, from the lack of minerals in our foods, for example. It can be an emotional thing, right? It could be a trauma. All of those things play a role, like I said, within homeopathy. And the idea of homeopathy is that all we need to do is to restore the balance within, because the body is an amazing thing and it does have the ability to self-heal. And when we give it the right input, it is able to take those things and restructure itself to find the root cause and to then heal from within. So, the biggest misconception, I think, about homeopathy is that we are taking a pill for X, Y, and Z. When in fact, it's actually you who's doing the healing. It is your body who's doing the healing. And the homeopathic remedy is the messenger. It is telling you, hey, you know what? This is what we need to heal. Let's focus on this. And it gives the energetic signature of that particular symptom picture, if you will, in order to bring about balance. So, those are some of the main principles within homeopathy. I wanted to make sure that I gave you that basic primer, because so often what happens is I'm very guilty of this. I walk into a conversation presuming that there is a basis of understanding. And unfortunately, for a number of reasons, which we've gone into actually on many of the previous podcasts, we don't always go into some of those basic primers, which are so integral in really understanding why we utilize homeopathy, particularly in really complex cases and chronic conditions and all of these things, and why it can be successful. Because, again, I think far too many people are stuck in this very traditional medical model, which dictates, if you have this diagnosis or if you have this set of symptoms, we have X, Y, and Z in our toolkit. Which would you like? Homeopathy is looking at you. Who are you? What makes you tick? What lights you up? What makes you sad? All of those things play a role in who you are fundamentally. And the beauty of homeopathy is that it is the only system of medicine that looks at you, the holistic you, every single part and parcel, and how it is that your body functions, rather than how can we stop X, Y, and Z symptoms. So I hope I was able to provide you this basic knowledge in homeopathy today. I really hope that you pass along this information, because it is information that really needs to get out there. Please go and follow us at Remedy Revolution Podcast on Instagram. Go to remedyrevolution.com. There's lots of information there. My personal website is heartwinghealing.com. I'll put all of that information in the show notes. There's so much more to learn about homeopathic remedies and how they can really help bring about a true healing. I hope you'll learn more. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.